Hello and welcome to Study with Sudhir. This is your digital classroom. My name is T.S. Sudhir. On the agenda today is the Dolphins. Yes, the poem which is part of the ISC class 11 and 12 English syllabus, and this is from the book of poems that you have as part of your syllabus, and this poem is written by Carroll and Duffy. It's a very deep poem, deep both metaphorically, also literally, because we are talking about dolphins. I spent close to 4 hours just kind of preparing to do this video lesson. That's the kind of intense preparation you need to do for this poem. Of course, I hope to kind of finish off explaining the entire poem in about half hour or so. Okay, but yes, a lot of preparation, a lot of deep meaning, and we will be doing a line by line, word by word explanation of this poem, because that's how English literature, especially poetry, is meant to be done, to be understood, to be appreciated, okay, and also from an examination point of view on how to approach the poem. Okay, so before we get into the poem, a little bit about the poet. There is of course a one-page description about this poet. Born in December 1955, a Scottish poet and playwright. She is Professor of Contemporary Poetry at Manchester Metropolitan University and was appointed Britain's Poet Laureate in May 2009. She is the first woman and the first Scot to hold the position. So, obviously, a lot of credit going to her, a lot of accomplishments as well, and it talks about her various works over a period of time. This particular poem, it covers many themes regarding oppression and lack of freedom, and we will be doing that in great detail. It also broaches ideas which have to do with animal welfare and treatment of animals. The poem takes us into the world of dolphins, an endangered species, and asks us to look at the world from their perspective. Okay, we're talking about imprisonment of humans, what it will do, and I think as we recorded during the lockdown, this lockdown fourth phase, I think we also have by now a fair idea of what imprisonment of a certain kind definitely means, don't we? Okay, the themes of oppression, violence, ecological conservation and sexuality find recurrence in many of Carroll and Duffy's works. Her dramatic monologues prove to be very effective in voicing the concerns of the marginalized, and that is something which we find extensively in this poem, The Dolphins. Now, before we get into the stanza by stanza, line by line, word by word explanation of the poem, a few points about the poem so that you understand what is this poem all about, the basic themes. Now, the poem is a dramatic monologue, and more importantly, it's written from the perspective of dolphins. I would advise you to have both the book with you. If you don't have the book by any chance, you would get a PDF on the net, so that's pretty easy. Number two, also keep a notebook and a pen to be able to take down exhaustive notes as I speak. You can keep pausing the video, or you could listen and understand the poem once and then have a second playing of the video in order to take down notes. I would suggest that probably would be a better option, because then you would understand it that much better. You need to write down the notes, because then that will almost serve as your first revision and understanding of the poem. Okay, that's what I would suggest. If I give you the notes, it doesn't help. It's, the Xerox culture is not really the best way to understand any subject for that matter, not just English literature. Okay, now the basic theme is about the emotions of dolphins that was once free when it was swimming in the ocean, in the vast sea, but now it is confined to what normally water amusement parks. I don't know how many of you have seen a dolphin show or an aquarium tank, where it has to do as its trainer, who is referred to as the man in this poem, tells it to, and as a result its freedom becomes extremely limited. Basically perform tricks to amuse the spectators in a circus. Point number three, at a very deep level, the poetess also wants to highlight the plight of those human beings which I just referred to, who are trapped because of circumstances, caught in some kind of a bind. Okay, and we will talk about it once we have finished with explaining the entire poem. The fourth point, the poem also wants us to tell us that man dominates the dolphins, even though they are actually seen as man's friends, an extremely docile and friendly creature, mammals. fellow mammals, wonderful sea animals. It's also a pointer to how people in your own life, in a very oblique sense, the poet is making the point that there would be people in your own life who would actually be trying to control you. Actually, there is a story in the story section, which kind of the story of an hour, which also conveys this kind of a point. And I was reminded of that, the story of an hour. People who you think are your best friends, people who you think are your well-wishers, but they actually end up controlling you, controlling your mind, in some sense controlling your body as well, restricting your freedom, and they will allow only what they want you to do. Okay, so these are the larger points that the poetess is also seeming to make in this poem. Okay. The fifth point that I want to make before we get into the poem is also that in some parts the poem is a little vague. It's a little what we call ambiguous. It's a little, confused and sends very confusing signals. You wonder what is the poet actually trying to say when she uses a particular word. Okay, we'll come to that in detail again. Stanza number 1. World is what you swim in or dance. It is simple. We are in our element, but we are not free. Outside this world, you cannot breathe for long. The other has my shape. The other's movement forms my thoughts and also mine. There is a man and there are hoops. There is a constant flowing guilt. Now you see, there is no rhyme or there is no meter to this poetry. It's almost like, one line flowing into the other. So it's a very different kind of poetic technique that Carol L. Duffy has used in this particular poem, The Dolphins. Now the poem starts with the dolphin addressing us as the human beings. The dolphin goes on to define the world as it understands the world, and the meaning of the word world, because that's the first word in this particular poem, and its own expectations from what the world ought to be like. Okay, that's the first point. The stanza also conveys what their world has been reduced to. When it says we are not free in the second line of the first stanza, or we are not in our element, again the second line of the first stanza, it conveys both disappointment, a sense of sadness and dejection. Okay. Now the first line, if you see, the key words in those first line is swim and dance, right? Swim and dance both convey a certain sense of rapid movement, isn't that so? Now swimming, as all of you know, gives a sense of freedom, a sense of expanse, even if it is in a swimming pool or in the river or in a pond, in a lake or in the ocean. It gives you a sense of expanse because you kind of move your hands in that kind of manner, and that's what dolphins do when they are in the vast ocean, right? But in the limited space of that tank or the amusement park, the water area, which is a very limited space that they have, they are made to dance. If you see, the dolphins would move almost in a synchronized manner. They would perform all those tricks for the audience. To entertain the spectators, it is within a narrow confine. So the change, the contrast is very stark between what they do in the ocean, swimming in the ocean, and dancing in the amusement park. It is a creature that roams freely around in the sea, but here its space is confined. And on top of that, it is forced to swim or dance in front of a crowd. It's almost like playing to the gallery in that sense, making its own life, the life of a dolphin, a matter of entertainment and amusement for other human beings, a public spectacle of sorts, right? You understand? It is now, the dolphin in that sense has been reduced to a live toy. Just like you have animals in the circus, of course many animals now, at least in circuses in India, are banned from performing. The tiger, the lion, the elephants, etc. But here it says that it has been reduced to being a public spectacle, a live toy of sorts that has to do as its master wills it to do. I hope I am going very slow so that you are able to take down notes and understand it very, very clearly. The first sentence of the first stanza, it is simple, is another sentence. It is simple. Now what does the poetess mean by that? It basically says that it says soon after she refers to both swim and dance. It's an indication of the fact that it is resigned to its fate, that this is its life. This is the life that it is forced to lead. We are in our element, but we are not free. Now, what does the element refer to out here? Element refers to water, to H2O. That it is their natural space. Water, whether it is in the ocean or inside this amusement park, is the same. It's the same water. Okay, so that is something which is the natural space for the dolphins, right? But since it is not the vast sea, they are not free. We are in our element, we are in the waters, but in these waters, we are not free. Understood? Their identity is now that of a captured mammal, someone who is captive, right? Then, outside this world, you cannot breathe for long. What does she mean by that? It says that its future life is confined to this limited space. Because the moment it tries to step outside this very tiny constricted world that she refers to, again first sentence and again third sentence referring to this world that it has to inhabit or it's forced to inhabit, it cannot survive. It cannot survive because escape is really not an option for the dolphin. Escape is not an option for the dolphin, so therefore it is something it cannot breathe for long outside this world. Okay. Now, the dolphins entertain and they also give the impression as though they are very joyous and completely enjoying themselves. That's the impression the audience comes back with when it sees this kind of a live show. But the fact of the matter is that they are merely existing. They are not living. They are existing, and there is a huge difference between living and existing. They are not alive in the real sense of the word, and I'll explain why. Because they are not free. Their freedom has been curtailed. The limited space and the fact that they have to do as their master orders makes their existence almost like a chained one, chained in a very metaphorical sense, right? That's what he's referring to out here in the first stanza. This stanza also refers to a man in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth sentence. There is a man, and it's an important reference because this reference will again come later on in the poem. And immediately you are made aware of the presence of this particular human being who actually controls and he is directly responsible for the dolphins' lack of independence, lack of freedom. You would have heard of this phrase, caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. Okay, so the devil in this case is the man, and the deep blue sea, okay, there is no deep blue sea, and the aquarium, we can say it's a very poor version of the deep blue sea that it was used to inhabiting, right? And that's what the life and the condition of the dolphins has been reduced to right now. Now, we come to the fourth and the fifth sentence, and I have left it deliberately because I wanted to point out the vagueness, the vague elements in this particular poem. The other has my shape, the other's movement forms my thoughts and also mine. Okay. Now, there are certain parts of the poem, as I mentioned, are a little ambiguous. Okay. Sometimes the word used is we. For instance, in the second line, she uses the word we are not free. But otherwise, she is using the word my shape. Okay. Also mine. So, constantly shifting between singular and plural within the same stanza in the poem. Okay. My shape, so it keeps alternating between talking about a single dolphin and as a collective. Also remember, the title of the poem is the Dolphins, not the dolphin. So she is talking about a collective, she is talking about in plural. The other has my shape. What does this other refer to? Okay, and I mean there are a couple of two different interpretations which I would tell you about. Now, one, it could mean to say that she is referring to the ocean, the vast sea, because it comes immediately after she has spoken about outside this world. It says the other has my shape. So, it almost seems like she is contrasting the aquarium tank to the vast ocean. Okay, the ocean bears the shape of the dolphin, and its waves, the movements is what makes it think. The other's movements forms my thoughts, right? But there is another interpretation which also you need to know about. It's quite possible, and that's the impression we get later on in the poem when again this reference to the other comes in the poem. Is it referring to a companion of the dolphin? Because mostly the dolphins move in a synchronized manner, 2 or 3 dolphins jumping together in a very synchronized kind of manner. They'll jump and dive at the same time. So is it referring to the companion of the dolphin? Okay, it could be talking about an identical looking dolphin, and it has to ensure that both their movements are in sync with each other. It has to bear them in mind. So it's probably the other and the movement. It's possible that the dolphin is thinking about that. There are these two interpretations because it's not clear what is the poetess actually referring to out here. And also mine. Now this is another very vague line in this particular poem. Who is saying this? And also mine. Is it the dolphin? Or I personally thought perhaps this was an authorial intrusion by Carroll and Duffy. That Carroll and Duffy is saying that even she agrees with what the dolphin is thinking. That could be another interpretation. And that it's not the dolphin saying in just these 3 words. Now soon after she makes a reference to man, okay, she talks about hoops. Hoops, you would have seen the different kind of props which are used to kind of make the entire act more entertaining. They are made to jump through hoops. So hoops in this case are also like weapons in the hands of man with which he controls the movements and the mind of the dolphin. Okay, the last 3 words, constant flowing guilt. There is a constant flowing guilt. What is this constant flowing guilt that is being referred to out here? Whose guilt is the dolphin talking about? The man's guilt at making the mammals do all this? That seems a little doubtful. More likely that it is the guilt of the dolphin. And what guilt of the dolphin could possibly the author be talking about? Now, one, it could be that the guilt of having been caught in the net of the fishermen and therefore having to live this kind of an imprisoned captive kind of a life, okay, for being careless of sorts, okay, because the references are coming soon after the reference to hoops. And also the guilt could be at its inability to perform the way its master wants it to. So there could again be these 2 interpretations of the constant flowing guilt. Okay, let's come to the second stanza. I hope it's clear, and I hope also that you are enjoying this very deep meanings to this poem. We have found no truth in these waters, no explanations tremble on our flesh. We were blessed and now we are not blessed. After traveling such space for days we began to translate. It was the same space, it is the same space always, and above it is the man. So again the reference coming to the man at the end of the second stanza, right? The first line of the second stanza is very powerful. We have found no truth in these waters. It's almost like damming the waters in the aquarium tank. A more simplistic explanation for this line would be that the dolphins do not find this water good for living as the ocean is their natural living space, right? But the poet also wants to obviously dam this space, which is why this strong line expression of there is no truth in these waters. No truth, this is to convey that this reality is not true, it is fake, and this is not the life that the dolphins should be living, ought to be living, meant to live, right? Also the line is a condemnation of the waters itself, no truth in these waters, which otherwise would be life to the dolphins. But the waters which are otherwise a medium of independence and freedom, but now these waters have become an accomplice of sorts to man. The man is using these waters as a companion, they are together in that whole bid to keep the dolphins captive, okay, in the commercial exploitation of these dolphins, because obviously man is making money as a result of the acts that the dolphins are made to perform, and the water is an accomplice to man in ensuring that these dolphins are commercially exploited on a day-to-day basis. Understood? Now, no explanations tremble on our flesh means that there is nothing pleasant about this, the feel of this water. About the feel of this water. See, there is one constant theme running through the poem of constantly contrasting the waters of the ocean and the waters of this limited space. Please bear that in mind. There is nothing pleasant about these waters feel that can make them feel better. And also no explanation about why they have been in these waters will make them understand the need to do so. Okay, there is nothing to be explained about why do they need to be inside these waters. The tone of the dolphin is rather sad and I would say rather depressing in many senses. It says we were blessed and now we are not blessed. Okay, it's almost, you know, a lot of self-pity, and it's also an expression of extreme grief and angst in these lines. We were blessed and now we are not blessed is a sentence that immediately conveys a sense of contrast. Blessed when roaming in the ocean freely and now not blessed within this confined space, right? Now comes the reference to space. If you see the next three sentences, each one of them has the word space. So obviously it has been used very deliberately by the poet in order to kind of convey the essence and the significance of space, right? For days refers to the fact that the dolphins took many days to register the fact that they are now in this limited space, right? When they began to translate as in when they began to realize what a grave injustice had been inflicted on them. But they also realized that there is not much difference between a small pool and a vast ocean. Please note, this is important. They also realized that there is not much of a difference, and you would wonder why do they think that there is not much of a difference between the vast ocean and the small tank or the small pool. Because she says it was the same space. It was the same space. Why? Because above it is the man. In the case of the ocean, they were caught by the fisherman, right? And obviously sold to this amusement park company wherever. And now they are under the control of another man, right? So neither the sea nor this pool is free of the domination of man. So the line, the sentence, the way it is structured, we began to translate, it was the same space, it is the same space always, and above it is the man, conveys a sense of acceptance of the harsh reality. समझ में आ गया? Good. I don't know if you are enjoying it, I am enjoying it. Stanza 3. And now we are no longer blessed, for the world will not deepen to dream in. The other knows, and out of love reflects me for myself. We see our silver skin flash by like memory of somewhere else. There is a colored ball we have to balance till the man has disappeared. Now, the third stanza is extremely poignant, you know. It shows a sense of acceptance, which was also the mood towards the end of the second stanza. Also here, please note, she is now suddenly using the word we, right? Though it was also used in the second stanza, but here we are no longer blessed. Okay, it shows a collectiveness of dolphins, that we are in it together. It also conveys a sense of camaraderie, of togetherness, right? Kinship and friendship. It accepts that we are no longer blessed, and the world, which is a reference to the pool that they are now living in, is not going to become the deep ocean that they dream of. You know, just because they dream of the vast ocean, this pool is not going to get transformed. This is their world, and this is the harsh reality which they need to accept, that they are no longer blessed, right? Now, in the second line of the third stanza, the reference to the other which we saw in the first stanza comes again. And here it seems to be reference, which is what I referred to in the first stanza. It seems to be a more clear reference to the presence of another dolphin, also because of the word we. as if to say that the other dolphin will understand and know my sentiments, my feelings. A reference to the love and kinship and friendship they have with each other, despite the situation all of them find themselves in. It reinforces the sense of collectiveness of kinship. Silver skin that is referred to in the fourth sentence is a reference to the body. Also, the dolphins are known to be an extremely intelligent mammal and they are extremely conscious of their body. It's also a simile. Silver skin is the use of a simile as a poetic technique, where the dolphin is thinking about the time when natural sunlight fell on their body when they were in the vast ocean, whereas inside the tank they would hardly be exposed to sunlight of the kind they were exposed when they were out in the vast sea. Okay, now the natural sunlight which would fall on their body would reflect off their skin, giving it a slightly glowing silvery kind of an appearance, which is why the use of the term silver skin, right? Also, the reference to the word we that I referred to, when it sees the skin of another dolphin, the silver skin of another dolphin, they are reminded of their group, their shoal in the vast ocean. Somewhere else, silver skin by memory of somewhere else, it's just reduced to a memory, it's not the present reality. Their identity is also reduced to like a memory of somewhere else. That identity of being in the ocean is only a part of past memory, it is not the present, nor is it likely to be the future, right? The second stanza has already conveyed a sense of giving up. So they also realize that the future is also going to be here in this limited confined space only. Okay. Now in the last two sentences there is a reference to a colored ball, right? But they now need to focus on balancing this colored ball. There is a colored ball we have to balance till the man has disappeared, and do it well till the master goes away. Till he is there supervising you, you have to ensure that you are able to balance that colored ball on your nose. You see some of the dolphins acts, they do precisely these kind of acts, much to the amusement of the spectators. Now it shows the sense of command and control by man, okay, and also it conveys, without saying it in so many words, a sense of fear till the man disappears. If he disappears, then even if you don't balance it too well, it's okay. But till such time that he is there in flesh and blood watching you, how well you balance, you need to do it well. That conveys a sense of fear. That they need to balance it as long as the man is around. The colored ball is also, interestingly, the introduction of what is known as an artificial element into the life of these people who are other dolphins, which are otherwise used to being in the lap of nature. There is no concept of a colored ball out in the vast ocean. They would still be playing their own games, right? Not with a colored ball. But here an artificial element of a colored ball has been introduced. Okay. So nature, natural versus the artificiality of the pool. Okay. So this is the kind of unnatural life that their life has now been reduced to. Okay. So I hope till here the three stanzas are absolutely clear, word by word explanation. You wouldn't get a better explanation on any other channel than this. I can assure you of that. Okay. Okay, now let's come to the final stanza, stanza 4. The moon has disappeared. We circle well-worn grooves of water on a single note. Music of loss forever from the other's heart, which turns my own to stone. There is a plastic toy. There is no hope. We sink to the limits of this pool until the whistle blows. There is a man, and our mind knows we will die here. So the poem kind of ends on a very, very despondent note. We will die here. And again the reference to the man. About how the man has become the overpowering presence in their life. Otherwise in the vast ocean there would be no presence of a man. Of course, the fishermen who catches them, so they need to be wary of. They do understand that the man controls everywhere. But otherwise on a day-to-day basis, almost a minute-to-minute basis, a man wouldn't be part of their life in the vast ocean as he is now in the pool, right? The sentiment of the stanza, as I said, is that of confinement, gloom, despondency and desolation, right? Now, dolphins connect the third and the fourth stanza by focusing on disappearance. That's what the third stanza ends with. The man has disappeared, and now it starts with the moon has disappeared. Now, what's really the connection? Okay, it talks of moon's disappearance, but while the man's disappearance is temporary because he will return. He will return. The moon's disappearance is permanent. And why so? Because they are inside a confined space and they are not exposed to the sun and the moon on the kind of regular basis they would be when they would be out in the sea, right? Also, the colored ball that we spoke about in the third stanza is also seen as a contrast because the moon's reference to the moon is coming soon after. It's almost like the colored ball is a poor substitute for the moon. You understand? Both are round. It's almost like, the moon and now the colored ball. We circle on a single note conveys a sense of limited space. Single note, please underline this, these words. And it also conveys a very monotonous, a very routine kind of existence that the dolphins are forced to lead. Single note conveys the monotony of sound, the music's note. Repetitive, everyday for the audience. The audience may be new, so they may be hearing it for the first time, but for these dolphins, it is extremely monotonous and repetitive. Whereas the waves of the ocean, you contrast to the waves of the ocean. Now, the waves of the ocean also, some people may find it extremely monotonous and repetitive. But each wave, and that's what the dolphins know, and anyone, if you speak to fishermen, they will tell you that each wave has its own sound, has its own meter, has its own tempo, has its own different sound. Okay, whereas it's not so with the music that is played inside the amusement park. Okay, groove is a word used in the first sentence of the fourth stanza. Now, groove is used to connect water with music because groove is a word used in both subjects. Groove by definition, when it concerns water, is a narrow trench through which water passes. Okay. You also groove to music, don't you? When you are enjoying music and you are kind of, moving your leg and generally tapping your feet, you are grooving to the music. So, groove is a word which is kind of used noun and verb in both with water as well as with music. Then, music of loss forever from the other's heart which turns my own to stone. Music of loss is a reference to how the dolphin feels when it hears the music of loss in another dolphin's voice from the other's heart. Basically saying when the companion is mourning the loss of freedom, it may not be, but when a companion is mourning the loss of the freedom of dolphins in general, it feels it even more so and changes its heart to that of stone. Meaning it feels that much more sad. Now, with this particular line, Duffy is basically emphasizing the lack of empathy on part of man, that it has kind of imprisoned an entire collective of dolphins for his own selfish commercial interests, right? Dolphins, as I said, have a very heightened sense of communication with each other. They use high frequency sound, and that is known as echolocation, to communicate with each other, which is why the music of loss felt by one dolphin can actually be tracked and felt by a fellow companion dolphin, right? My own to stone is a line which almost conveys fatality, conveys death in a sense. A stone, as you would know, under the weight of the stone ensures that it falls deep inside water. Similarly, Duffy is saying that the dolphin, when she says we sink, okay, we sink to the limits of this pool until the whistle blows, it's suggesting the heaviness of the heart and death. Okay. Now, in the third stanza, we saw the reference to the colored ball. Here, the reference is to a plastic toy. Okay. The plastic toy again is alluding to the artificial addition to the life of the dolphins. It's also Duffy's indirect way of conveying that all these dolphins have become like toys in the hands of man. He tells them to do something, they do what he wills them to do. It's just like in a circus, an animal like the lion or a tiger, I mean in circuses in olden days, the way it will, if he says jump, the ringmaster says it to jump onto a chair or a stool, even a lion or a tiger would do that. Otherwise, a lion and a tiger can kill a man. But because the man has played on the mind of that mighty tiger or lion, the carnivorous, he's able to control the mind and make him scared of man. It's pretty much here with the dolphins. Also, of course, they are not in the same league as a tiger or a lion. So, they have become toys in the hands of man. There is no hope. There is no hope, she says, is to say that there is no respite or freedom from this routine. We sink to the limits of this pool can also be interpreted very literally, because as part of the act, the dolphins actually go down, they touch the bottom of the pool, and in a very synchronized manner, in sync with each other, they come out, to the applause of the audience, right? But the time that they spend touching the bottom surface of the pool has to be just that split second. It has to be synchronized with the other dolphin, right? It does not depend on their wish, but the synchronized time within which they need to rise up as part of the act that they need to perform for the spectators. It depends on the blow of the whistle of the man, because he has trained them that they can be there only for that part of the second, for that split second. Okay, so that sinking is no longer, in the vast ocean, they can do whatever they want to do. Here, it's not so. It does not depend on their will. It depends on the whistle of the man, right? Last point here. The reference to man in the last sentence of the final stanza is once again indicative, it's once again suggestive of the power that he exercises over them. Also, when she writes that our mind knows we will die here, it ends the poem on an extremely hopeless note, that there is absolutely no hope. The dolphins don't see any hope for themselves. So that's as far as this rather fascinating, very deep poem is concerned. I hope you have understood the poem. Please take down notes, use much of the explanation that I have used in this particular poem in your examination answers. It will be your passport to getting high marks, guarantee. Now, quickly we'll just go through a few points as part of the critical appreciation of the poem. Now, the tone of the poem, as we saw, is rather depressing, it's rather despondent. There is no hope, our mind knows we will die here. It shows how the dolphins are almost very certain that they have a very bleak kind of a future. We are not free and we cannot breathe for long, emphasizes that they have no freedom because their free movements are essentially constricted, curtailed. We also conveys, the use of the plural we conveys that it is not an isolated case of one dolphin. Here dolphins are being spoken about as a group, and also it could extend to several other creatures who also are controlled by man. It's also a commentary in that sense about the equation between man and several other species on this planet, right? The power equation, as it were. Also, since Duffy is a well-known feminist writer, another interpretation that is possible is that, especially with the use of the word man, M-A-N, and us as in the dolphins, she could also be kind of alluding, pointing to the plight of women who are often marginalized in the power structures in which the man holds all the aces, so to say. Okay. Now, in terms of form and language, the poem is simple. As I said, there is no rhyme or meter in this particular poem. The language is pretty simple in almost all the sentences, but the ambiguity, the vagueness that I referred to is what makes it a little, makes the reader curious as to what the poet is actually referring to. The use of enjambment, that is, it kind of continuing with each other, and use of repetition is also a poetic technique that she has used in order to highlight the tiredness of the dolphins, that they are just tired of this existence in the amusement park. Okay, that is what the poetess is essentially referring to. So, I hope this poem is clear. Please revise this poem, this part of the ISC class 11 and 12 syllabus, and important again from the examination point of view. Thank you very much for watching.